So today I'm gonna be reacting to Paul's heavy spoiler Moon Knight and an explain post-credit scene breakdown.
Okay, so Moon Knight is now over, and the series closes out with a big post-credit scene that could tease some major things for the future, whilst also potentially robbing our characters of the happy ending that they got together. The episode follows Mark Spector and Stephen Grant as they learn to live together in harmony and finally become the yin to each other's yang. In the field of reeds, Mark could potentially have an eternity of paradise ahead of him, but he forgoes this in order to rescue Stephen. Placing his heart into Stephen's hand,
recording
he
like this so I
frees
can
him,
minimize
and after Osiris opens up the gates,
the
they're
noise
able
in the
to return to
background.
the
You might hear
surface.
the chair
So the
still,
pair make a deal with Khonshu to help
but
them
we're
out
gonna
one
see how
last
this
time,
works out.
and in doing
And
so,
I'm gonna try a
they'll
different
finally
format
be free.
just to see
Everything
like
seems groovy, baby.
how it will look.
Big Bird ends
Wow,
up betraying them in the end,
you guys
and
will
we're
receive that.
introduced to his new avatar, aka Jake Lockley. Thing is, this is the extra personality inside Mark that has been teased throughout the season, and it very much sets up an even bigger bad in both him and Khonshu. So what the hell's going on? Well, throughout this video, we're going to be breaking it all down and going over what we think the ending is about. If you enjoy the video, then please hit the thumbs up button, and also don't forget to subscribe for videos like this every day. With that out of the way, thanks for clicking this. Now let's get into Moon Knight. Okay, so the first thing I want to touch upon is probably going to make people hate me, as it's my interpretation of the ending, but I promise we'll go through what's more likely to be happening later on in the vid. Now just backtracking to the ending, in his final exchange with Khonshu, Mark refuses to kill Harrow, who has just had Amit placed within him. He tells him,
"You want them dead?
You gonna kill him yourself?
Do it yourself."
So I mean, he did have to get an avatar, I suppose. This is because, as we learned, Khonshu isn't really able to affect the real world, and though he can throw some bins about, he can't actually kill people. At this point, Mark and Stephen are released, and they almost immediately.
But from like
travel into the
Mark's
hospital
perspective, you gotta
illusion
think
that the pair built
he's
in their minds.
come on, he's gonna come
After
back
breaking the fantasy, they
if you
return
didn't
home
kill
and
him.
wake
So
up
what were
in
you gonna
bed
do?
with a sort of replay of the first episode. However, this time there are two goldfish inside the tank, living in harmony, showing how they've learned to live together. Now, unpopular opinion time, but I actually think this is still a fantasy. Why I believe that is because they go from the pyramid to the hospital to the bed almost instantaneously. It's like Mark and Stephen beat Harrow, fall back, and then wake up in bed, almost like they've been transported there immediately. They also say,
But it could be him like switching between the altars and not knowing.
which makes me think this moment happens straight away from when they're released. Now the fact that the rankle is tied to the bed and someone has been out and bought the goldfish without them knowing makes me believe that Jake
Right.
would have done this and that he may have taken over the moment they were released. I kind of feel like the pair might actually be trapped in a fantasy whilst Jake is out in the real world, and these quick jumps from Cairo to the hospital to the bedroom with the new stuff in shows it's all in Mark and Steven's head. Again, controversial, and I know from just bringing it up on the last video that some people hate me and just wish I'd shut the f up, which is a fair comment. Now, the more standard way to interpret this is exactly how it's presented, and that they end up back in London. Either way, it still sort of leads us to the same conclusion, which we get in the post-credit scene. Mine is just a bit more of a head trip.
Meet my friend, Jake Lockley.
Now in this scene, Khonshu is very much getting Jake to do what he wanted Mark to. He is finally killing Amit, however it has deeper repercussions beyond this, because all of the Ennead were killed, and the gods not having any power at the moment was showcased by the fact that Khonshu turned the sky to night without anyone being like, hey, you can't do that. Now in case you haven't read the comics, they paint Khonshu out more as the villain the further into things you get. The Jeff Lemire run revealed that he'd been watching over Mark since he was a child, and that he deliberately fractured his mind so that
He
could
was
take
wearing
over.
that suit,
It
so
is
I
possible
think
that he
they might
killed
even
his brother in
they might
order
go
to
that
break him
route.
further, and this is why we saw an omen outside the cave that looked like him. Khonshu is a bad guy, hell-bent on ruling like any of the other gods, and with them out the way in the Ennead, he can now do what he wants. Amit is the last one who's still inside a person, and this is why he sends his best man Jake to collect him from the hospital. The hospital is called Sankiewicz.
So are they?
It's named after the artist
That was my
Phil,
question
who's
in
done
the
lots of
reaction.
Moon
It's
Knight
like,
work.
are they
Much
going
in the same way
forever
that
or?
the series opened with Harrow
But
getting ready
they
with
are
a glass of
deities.
water and so on. Here we see him with a cup of coffee that he knocks over before he's taken out. He doesn't have his cane, and due to the years of walking on broken glass,
Oh, I
he
got a
is
head.
wheelchair bound. That he knocks over before he's taken out. He doesn't have his cane, and due to the years of walking on broken glass, he is wheelchair bound. As Jake wheels him out, we see several dead orderlies, and he takes him to a limo with Khonshu in the back. And in the source
I
material,
was wondering
Jake
why
was a
people never
cab
noticed
driver,
those bodies.
So this is kind of in line with that. They have changed things up as Stephen Grant was a millionaire playboy, whereas in the show he's more of a bumbling but lovable fool. Now Jake was never really an assassin in the comics, and he was more just someone who kept their
Yeah, I
heads to the
believe
street,
they definitely
kept
changed that
intel,
because
and
he
kept
was,
the collection of
he would have
sources
been,
Crawley
he definitely would have
pointed
been
him
Bruce
in the
Wayne.
right direction. I think it's important to bear in mind as it makes it more difficult to say where things are going to go, and they've also switched up some of his character traits. For example, the guy speaks Spanish, showing a distinct difference between him, Mark, and also Steven. Steven was a Cockney, so I love the way they all have their own kind of voices. Now we did theorize throughout the series that there were accent changes that hinted towards him, but I would be happy to have those cast to the side and just have him speaking Spanish, because it sounds badass, goddamn.
Hoy te toca perder.
Now there were of course hints towards him with the date in episode 1 being organised by someone who clearly wasn't Mark due to his marriage. There was also the fight in episode 3 which ended in a bloodbath, the sarcophagus in the hospital.
I thought at some point they was going to like show us those scenes, but I guess maybe in season 2, because they want to show more Jake now that we know about him.
Anyway, he throws Harrow in the back, kicks his chair out the way, and goes and sits in the front. This limo calls back to the comics as it was Mr. Knight's ride, and even the license plate is taken from the source material. Khonshu also appears in a suit, which is a nice little carryover from him in that run. Khonshu says,
Mark Spector truly believed that after he and I parted ways, I wanted his wife to be my avatar, when he has no idea how troubled he truly is.
Now it turns out that Mark and Steven are completely unaware of Jake, and I think going forward they'll start to find the bodies left in the wake of Jake and Khonshu's killing.
I mean, it happened quite a bit of times that I would think they were like, hey, this happened again. If it wasn't me, it wasn't you.
Mark and Steven won't be in control when he is, and it's unlikely that Layla would ever want to kill the man she loves, whose body Jake inherits. It's a really cool ending, and we cut to several iconic locations in London as the pair drive out. Huge shout out to Matt Baker on YouTube for pointing out that you can catch the mosque, which has 2 crescent moons on it. You can also see the moon in the sky, signalling an almost gangster-like dominion that's now been brought to London. I love the idea going forward that Mark, Steven and Jake are the heroes and villains, and it's such a great idea. Throughout the season we've had Mark and Steven going back and forth with each other through mirrors, and we also get our first look at Jake in one. However, whereas with the other two they'd see the reflection of their opposite when they looked in one, here only he stares back, showing he's in complete control. As of now we haven't had a second season announced, but it definitely feels like the type of show that deserves one. All the gods will be scrambling for new avatars, but Khonshu could prop himself up at the top.
I want more.
He's still angry about being trapped in the statue and will do whatever he can to make sure they don't get back into positions of power. As talked about earlier, I'd love the reveal that Mark and Steven were all just trapped in a fantasy and that Jake was in control. We know this show can pull the rug from under you in a second, and I'd love to see a battle in their minds as they all vie for control. Now we also have Blade and Dane Whitman on the other side of London, who I think would be great characters to kind of bleed into Moon Knight. There's so many different ways that they could go with things, and I feel like this is one of the best post-credit scenes that Marvel have ever put out. It's the perfect way to introduce Jake, take out Harrow, and it also somewhat works as a standalone thing, where you could just see this as an end. However, I demand more, so give us more Feige, or I'm kicking off. Now I'd of course love to hear your thoughts, so make sure you comment below and let me know, you punk. We're running a competition.
Alright, yeah, so sorry for the squeaks, but as far as like continuing, it's like where do you go from there? Do you introduce him to new characters? He is in London, and I'm glad they changed that aspect of him, like being that billionaire or whatever, the rich guy, because he would have been too close to Bruce Wayne. That's why they changed it, because it's like, oh, he's Batman pretty much. But yeah,